Hello and welcome to the 12 Months to Marathon podcast with me, John Hill, the running podcast for the over 35s with Marathon Dreams. Episode 27, the start of a marathon journey. So what's going on with me at the moment? Right, well, I'm into week 7 of marathon training. I've just done my first 20-mile run of this cycle and it was okay. It was a bit messy. Weather in the UK here is a bit icy at the moment, so it's a little bit treacherous out on the roads, but it was fine to do it. Tested out my fueling strategy, a little bit all over the place because of crossing roads and traffic and the usual stuff you face if you go out on a run where you have to go through sort of residential areas and things like that. So there's a bit of that. But yeah, overall, pretty happy with the start point. It's always a good experiment, your first big run of your cycle, because you learn a lot about yourself and it's good to have that experience under your belt, particularly in testing out your nutrition strategy and also testing out your fueling strategy pre-race and in your run as well, because it's good to get that done early so you've got an understanding of how it's going to fit. If you've done marathons before, then you should have a good idea about your race day strategy anyway from a fueling point of view, but if it's a first timer, these are the kind of runs where you want to be testing it out. So feel good, body's reacted to it a little bit. I've got a little bit of a headache, I'm a little bit achy because it's the first time I've run that distance in a while. But the real plus for me, and this is your first lesson here, is that because I built a base in October, November before I started marathon training, it was easy for me to slot into the training cycle. So that made a massive difference. So what I want to do today is talk about week 1 of marathon training. Because for a lot of people who listen to this podcast, they're doing the big spring marathons in April or May. So you've either started marathon training or should have started marathon training, or you'll be starting that cycle very soon. So I wanted to give you this one because I think this is an important time, and there's a couple of reasons for that. The first reason it's an important time is because, of course, you're starting a marathon training cycle. The second reason is because, particularly here in the UK, we've had a bit of a wintry blast where the roads have been treacherous. Now, it's been okay where I am in the centre of the UK, but for some people, they've had snow and it's been quite bad in terms of icy routes. So it has been challenging. Now, I'm not big on this bravado thing that some people say about, just go out anyway, because it's dangerous. Now, cold, no problem. Wet, no problem. All of that, no problem. Dark, early, no problem. But when you've got ice, or black ice particularly, it's a risk. Because if you go over and break your, smack your hip off the floor or break your ankle or something, that's going to ruin your marathon. And if you're doing a big marathon and you've got a place specially, that's going to really hurt you. And you don't want to do that. I don't think you should do that. So we have to be a little bit careful. But the weather's going to turn next week. Again, it's going to get a bit warmer, particularly here. So it gives us the opportunity. So when we're in week 1, it's the opportunity for everybody just to take stock of what's ahead. But this is a bit of a paradox here, because we need to understand the journey, but we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves and we don't want to get overwhelmed, which I'll explain in a second. The first thing I want to say is this. I get a lot of questions over on 12 Months to Marathon at Instagram. Please feel free to follow me over there. I get a lot of questions, and I get a lot of people who've commented, and I'm getting the impression that they either don't have a plan or they don't really know how to follow their plan. Okay, which is okay, particularly if you're a first-time marathon runner. And the reason why I say it's okay is because that if you're not used to following plans and you've perhaps got a real burning desire to do a marathon, that's brilliant, but you've not maybe got that much athletic experience or fitness experience or whatever, then of course following plans is new to you. Now, when we get to marathon distance, following a plan is essential, because what you're preparing your body for is a big deal, particularly if you're a first-time marathoner. Now, if you're an experienced marathoner like me and like some of the other people who follow me, then it's about fine-tuning. And if you're looking for a PB, again, fine-tuning. If it's your first marathon and you don't know what 26.2 miles feels like, it's really important that we get you into that headspace as quick as possible. Okay, so number 1, if you haven't got a plan or you don't know how to follow your plan, get a plan and find out how to follow it, okay, or ask somebody how to follow it. It's worth the investment of time and or money, I promise you, because you don't want to get too far down the line. You don't want to do what, unfortunately, a lot of people do in January, which is take or leave their fitness. The whole resolution thing, I tried it, I'll leave it. You can't try marathon training, because you will get found out on the day big time. So what we want to do is put you in the right headspace to say, okay, what's important here? So number 1, have I got a plan? Number 2, do I know how to follow that plan? If those 2 boxes ticked, fantastic. The third thing is to follow it. Now, if you haven't been able to train as much as you like this week because of snow or because of conditions, and perhaps you need to invest in a gym membership to go on a treadmill, do it. Okay, I know running's an expensive game, but it's going to be so worth maybe trading off something else to do that so you can at least get miles on your legs. I don't do speed work when it's icy, really, unless I've got a really safe place to do it. I'll do like slower runs because I know I can control it. But I did my speed work, for example, this week in the gym on a treadmill. Because actually, it's a little bit better just because it's a bit varied. So I'm pained to do a long, slow run on a treadmill, but I have done my speed works. At least it's varied, so it breaks up the monotony of just looking at the same thing. So that's one thing to consider. If you've lost this week for whatever reason, you've got to put it behind you and get back at it next week. Yeah, you can't leave this thing too long. If we get into 3s and 4s weeks-wise and you haven't really started, you're going to really struggle. You can't get into that mindset. So if you're physically able to, you need to get back on this plan straight away. Here's what I'm going to say about plans. As long as you've got a plan, it's a fantastic start, okay? Because a lot of people haven't. So if you've got a plan, an actual proper, structured marathon training plan that you can follow, you're doing okay, all right? The effectiveness of that plan is a different conversation, okay? Because what we don't want to do here is throw anybody off, okay? There are some things that I certainly recommend that should be on a marathon training plan. For example, on my marathon training plan, there are 3 20-mile runs and 2 22-mile runs. Now, I'm trying for a sub-3 marathon, so my marathon's a little bit more intense, quote-unquote, than my plan, is a little bit more intense, quote-unquote, than other people's. So there are some fundamentals, I think. But the first and foremost, if you've got a plan, stick with it. Don't be Dr. Googling. Don't be looking round. Don't be trying getting confused now. Follow that plan if you're uber confident. Now, you still have time, because I'm speaking to some people at the moment who are doing the end of April marathons, for example, maybe the May marathons, to get some help and maybe get some coaching. If that's something you want to do, have a look at that. Fantastic. Maybe get some help, maybe get some guidance from somebody now, so at least they can put you on the right lines as soon as possible. You want to get that done early, so you've got the clarity. If you haven't got the clarity and you keep leaving it, and you're not confident, not only is it going to affect you physically, because it might hamper your training, it's also going to affect you mentally. So you want to look at that. The next point I want to talk about is organisation. Now, organisation is a skill. So if you can be organised with marathon training, you can probably be organised in other areas of life as well. So if we think about the typical person that sets a New Year's resolution who isn't really that committed to it, who's just got flimsy goals, they'll say something like, oh, I think I should lose weight, or I'll probably want to lose some weight. So they're not really committed to something. That's different to a marathon, right? Because when I speak to people on the phone, I don't really have to ask them what their motivations are, because they've got a marathon to do. So if that's not motivation enough, we've got a problem, in my opinion. So you've got to be organised, and you've got to think differently to other people. Yeah. So, for example, a classic that I see in the fitness arena will be, I'm going to go to the gym twice next week, right? No, you won't. You need to know exactly when, what time, what day. Everything's got to align. Does that make sense? So everything's got to align, so you know exactly what's going on. Now, for example, with myself, because of my situation, I've struggled this week because I've tried to fit in all different things, and now I'm having to make up some miles here, make up some miles there. But I will get it done, but I'm having to be a bit more creative because of my situation. I can't just follow a plan to the letter because I can't run this day, that day in the format that it's set out. So what I have to do is think on my feet a little bit and adjust things round. That's the organisation, yeah, because you've got to get these runs in, you've got to get these miles in. It's okay to miss the odd run, of course, like we talked about before, but if you miss too many and you miss the important ones, it's going to throw you back. So you've got to get a hold of this organisation. Yeah, I see too many people who are very flippant with marathons. And that's okay, but you are going to get found out on the day. And I'm talking about first timers here. I'm not talking about people who are fit, who've got experience, who can just go and do one. I'm talking about the people who haven't got that experience. You have to think differently. You can't think like other people. You can't pick up and put it down. You've got to be on it. And now's the time to do that. And you've got to do it early. Yeah. I think with a marathon, you have to be fairly disciplined, and for me, the advice has to be fairly blunt in the sense of, no, this is personal, but I have to be as honest as I can be about my own marathon experience, which is, you've got to, number one, you have to have a plan. Number two, you have to follow the plan. And number three, you have to make sure that you're organised, because you have to get these runs in. That said, you don't want to get overwhelmed. So overwhelm comes from thinking too far ahead, because what you don't want to do is sit there and look at your 16-week plan, look 8 weeks in the future and start flapping about a 20-mile run 8 weeks in the future. Your job is next week. Well, next week now, probably as you're listening to this, your job is next week. Yeah, let's get next week done. And then once you've looked at next week, your then job is to say, right, my next job is to do the first run of next week, okay? And take it step by step and be organised for next week, yeah? And then the following week, organise for that week. But don't go too far ahead of yourself, because you'll get overwhelmed with perhaps the bigger distances later on, okay? So this is important. This is really, really important, and it's good to get this now. So I don't want to give you too much, because I think this is fairly simple in terms of marathon training. So here's some fundamentals for you in your first week. You should have a 16-week plan at least, or if you've had longer than that, you should at least have a plan from previous weeks until the marathon is done. So you should have a plan that you're confident in you can follow. You should have some level of organisation, so you know exactly when you're doing your runs each week and how you're going to adjust and be flexible if you need to be. And number 3, you need to have an idea about how you're going to fuel and how you're going to recover, especially if you're upping your mileage and you're not used to it, okay? Because your body is going to react. Now, if you're over 35 and you're listening to this, or if you're pushing sort of 50 like me, you've got to be uber careful with your fueling and strategy and your recovery, because your body's not the way it was 30 years ago. So it's not going to be able to recover the way it used to. So you've got to have a recovery and fueling strategy as well. So please, for me, don't go out there thinking you can just knock this out. Don't think you can just get round to it, or I'll do it if I can, or I'll play it by ear. You can't do that with a marathon. These flimsy concepts that have got no committal to them, you can't think like that in this game. You have to be committed to it, and you have to plan meticulously each week, take each week as it comes, and you have to be disciplined to be able to do that. And I promise you, on the day, you'll be thankful. Because everybody gets caught up with the romance of a marathon. They get caught up with the medal, the t-shirt, and all of that. They see the pictures on social media of the celebrations at the end. That's not the race. The race is the training. The marathon is the celebration of that. Because a marathon's hard, but it's not as hard if you put the work in over the next 16 weeks or so to make sure you get it done. And I don't apologise for anything I say, because it's important. Some people have said to me in the past, oh, well, everybody's different. Yes, they are, but 26.2 miles is still 26.2 miles for everybody. And yes, we all have to be flexible, and yes, we all have to do things. But if you've committed to this thing, you have to do it. I see posts on social media, I haven't got time to run. But you've entered a marathon. Surely at some point you would have thought you had to train. So don't be naive with this thing. Make sure you're on point. And if you need help, reach out and get help from wherever you can. Yeah? So make sure, A, you've got a plan. B, you know how to follow it. C, you're organised. And D, you've got some idea about your fueling, rest, recovery, and nutrition. Okay? I'm going to leave you with that for now. You'll see me talking a lot more over the next few weeks about my own journey, helping you through it as well as I go, and helping other people through it and answering questions as best I can. 12 Months to Marathon on Instagram. Please follow me over there for your free daily tips and content. If you want to reach out to me for any support or coaching, best place to do it, 12 Months to Marathon. We can certainly have a chat. We've got some options around some coaching. And look, if you reach out and it's not for you, at least you ask the question. Okay. So that's it for now. Don't forget to like and share this podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. I do appreciate it. Please subscribe and follow it as well. If you want to favourite it, or drop a love heart. Depending on where you get it from, I really, really appreciate that. The shares really helps. If you know anybody who's doing a marathon in the spring and they're perhaps struggling and need some guidance, share this with them, share my Instagram with them, and we should give them all the help they need to at least get round. And remember, 12 Months to Marathon on Instagram for all the information you need. So if you are doing that spring marathon and you've got everything in place, I wish you the best of British, because you'll need a bit of that during the process. However, if you're in control, the looks minimum. Hope is not a strategy, yeah, particularly with marathons. So yeah, hope it goes well. Thank you so much for listening as always, and I look forward to speaking to you all soon.